When seating primers, there are a few things to keep in mind and to think about. What we want is we want a primer which is flush or slightly below the edge of the head of the case. What that means, why don't we want it above? Why don't we want what they call a high primer? You could actually feel that pressure when you're closing a bolt if the primer sticks out of the back of the case. You remember, the face of a bolt is a flat surface, and it's designed so that the flat part of the head of your case is flush against the metal, the flat face of your bolt. So if your primer is sticking out, or a high primer, you can have problems closing the bolt. You could even theoretically, potentially have some sort of a problem with maybe even the primer firing if it's too high, if you're putting too much pressure on it. Remember, primers are an impact ignition. So they're designed to be struck by something and then to burn, the compound inside to explode or burn, which ignites the powder. So like some tools are like this Frankfurt Arsenal tool is actually a really good tool. You've got an ability here with this adjustment wheel to adjust the primer seating depth in increments of 1/1000th of an inch. There are some tools out there, some manufacturers make tools to measure the actual depth of the primer. I personally don't use one. I know that in commercial and military ammunition standards, they have a primer can be no deeper than a certain number. I believe it's about 8/1000ths of an inch. But you certainly don't want it anything greater than the face of the head of the cartridge case. So, you know, slide your case into the shell holder. You know, this particular priming tool has a tray that you can put their primers in, and it feeds them in one at a time in the correct orientation. And then you just do some experiments. Adjust this until it is seating the primer to where it is flush or slightly below flush. Now, also, we don't want the primer to be above the head of the case. We also don't want the primer to be too far into the case or crushed. I've done this personally when setting up a priming tool. It was not set up correctly, and to where, you know, the way these priming tools work is when you depress this plunger, you have this lever here, you have a little plunger comes up, a little rod that comes up, which pushes the primer up and into the primer pocket. So the diameter of this little rod or piece here is smaller than the primer. It's not the same diameter as a primer, slightly smaller than a primer. So what you're going to see is, if you can feel it, you can feel physically crushing, or you can feel that rod pushing into the primer. You don't really want that. If you see a primer that has rings on it, or looks like it's been like smashed into the primer pocket, you'll see a ring maybe pushing it into one side or the other. That's probably not a round you want to fire. You might have compromised performance from the primer. So, you know, you take some time, set up your primer tool. Once you have it set for that particular case, you should be good to go. And these types of tools, like this Frankfurt Arsenal, they have multiple different shell holders you can slide in here. So one tool, you can load everything from 223 up to the Magnum calibers, I'm sure, where you slide the case in. And these shell holders slide out, and they're replaceable.